Well, this week, 71 Labour MPs put their names to a letter calling for a second referendum or a people's vote. And yesterday, Labour's shadow Brexit secretary appeared to take the party one step closer to backing one. But there is frustration among some on the Labour benches that the party's leadership isn't quite there yet. Well, joining us now is David Lammy. Thank you very much for being with us on the programme today. Now, you're perhaps one of the most vocal supporters of a second referendum. I just want to put directly to you some of what people were telling me in Whitstable. I can just pull a quote up just so we can know exactly what we're talking about. This is from a young man called Jack Ryan, a fisherman. He said, "I voted already, and if they take it back to another vote because they haven't got the answer they wanted, then what's the point in us even voting?" And I think that is a sentiment that comes back again and again. What's the point in me voting if it's just going to be ignored?
I understand that. I was in Peterborough a few weeks ago and people were saying similar things. They're really frustrated with Westminster and politicians for not coming up with a solution. But the point is this, we either leave with no deal, and that is a very painful Brexit, which it looks to me like Parliament has ruled out, or we leave with a deal that is hatched by parliamentarians, which is probably a pointless Brexit, and Norway Plus is that pointless Brexit, because frankly we would be leaving, we'd still have free movement, we'd still be paying the EU a lot of money, and for all of those reasons it seems to me that the deal that emerges that parliamentarians can get around needs to have the informed consent of the British population, because many people, Leavers and Remainers, will feel that they didn't vote for it.
You see, that's the thing, informed consent, because I think a lot of people would think, actually, they were well informed the first time round, and actually it's quite patronising for MPs to say that they didn't really know what they were voting for.
Well, let's be honest, a lot of water has passed under the bridge. Theresa May lost by 230-odd votes. We are now in a mess. It's a constitutional crisis. It's not clear that there is a majority for any deal, in fact. So what we can't do is crash out, which is painful. I hope a deal emerges and it's a soft Brexit, but it does seem to me that there is a risk that we upset both Leavers and Remainers if basically Westminster hatches the deal and signs and delivers it, and many people think, I didn't actually vote for this. So it's for that reason that you've got to have a final say. The British people has got to resolve this. And I've said this before, Sophie, you cannot argue that you undermine democracy with more democracy. That's just not the way that great nations like ours establish themselves.
But some people would feel that it is denying democracy, that it's their voices being ignored. Are you not worried about some of the consequences for the country if we have to go through another referendum before, when the first one was so divisive?
Look, we've seen the division in the country. We see it outside Westminster with the way that some members of the public, often on the hard right, are behaving towards parliamentarians. We see it in families that are divided across this country. Yes, of course, we have to bring this to an end, but it seems to me that the way to bring it to an end is to present the British people no longer with this leave and we don't understand what the terms of leaving are. This time, we understand exactly what the terms of leaving are when we get that deal that Parliament can sign off, or indeed, we can remain within the European Union, which is the option I prefer, let's be clear on that, because we've looked into the abyss and decided, sorry, not for us.
OK. You said a little bit earlier in the interview that you hope a deal is done. Does that mean that there is a Brexit deal that you could vote for?
Well, certainly I would prefer a soft Brexit somewhere like Norway to Theresa May's botched deal that got us nowhere and
so could
why
you
it was
vote
rejected.
For it if it was on the table?
It's the terms under which it was put. I'm very clear, and I'm writing in the Observer today, that I could only vote for it on the basis that there was a final say referendum. Because if you're someone, let's say in a Labour heartland constituency, You thought you were getting an end to free movement, and politicians have taken that off the table. You thought you weren't going to be paying into the money into the EU, and politicians are now saying we are going to still be paying money into the EU. And worse, you're now subject to all the rules of the European Union without a say. Then, my God, surely we've got to ask the British people if they're up for that. That's only fair. So, of course, economically it would be less damaging. But my view is, look, let's stay in the European Union and actually have an influence on free movement, actually have an influence on the rules, and actually have an influence on bureaucracy, red tape and monies. That's my view. Let's see what the British people think.
How would you describe Labour's current position on Brexit?
Well, look, I think we've got an open goal here, and I'd like the Labour Party to go through the door and score the goal. And the only way of doing that, it seems to me, is to get us into a place where we are preparing for that final say referendum that has to take place.
So at the minute, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn is missing the goal? He's hitting the crossbar.
Well, he's moving the goalposts. And I've been very clear on that. You know, we now have seen that the deal has not gone through, that a vote of confidence has not been successful, as people like me predicted back in September last year. It seems to me there's no point continuing with votes of no confidence, you know, throwing darts but actually missing the board.
Do you think an election's going to happen?
I think an election's extremely unlikely because members of the DUP are not going to put Jeremy Corbyn, who has been a long-term friend of Sinn Féin, into number 10, let's be clear. And even Dominic Grieve and Asubri are not saying that they are going to vote no confidence in a Conservative government, which they prefer to Jeremy Corbyn. So I don't see any prospects of a general election. No, what we've got to do is get around what the alternative deal is, but be clear that we should set in place the timetable now to get that second referendum that's a final say referendum. And let's be clear on this. The only way we're now going to get a Brexit is if the Labour Party whips for it. So the question is the Labour Party going to whip for Theresa May's Brexit, or is the Labour Party going to get clear on the options for the British people, the best options for the British people? And my view, the best options for the British people is now to remain within the European Union.
Jeremy Corbyn's always talked about the importance of party democracy, about listening to the party members. The conference motion was saying that they want to push for a general election. If you can't get that, then a second referendum is on the table. Now, as you've said, a general election seems unlikely. You've had the confidence vote and lost. So why do you think it is that the party isn't explicitly backing a second referendum? And do you think Jeremy Corbyn is going back on some of those very strong words he's used in the past about the importance of listening to membership?
Well, I think Keir Starmer was very clear yesterday. The moment has arrived. The moment has arrived for clarity and for leadership. And for those of us that have campaigned for a final say people's vote, we are absolutely clear that requires the Labour Party to whip for that vote.
So why has Jeremy Corbyn not done it?
Well, look, I think that I think that Jeremy has been hedging. I recognise that he has had a national leadership role, and if we went back 2.5 years, it's absolutely clear that the Labour Party, like the Conservative Party, was split on this issue. But as we have travelled 2.5 years, as we see the mess that Theresa May has created, as we see the red lines that she has put in place, opinions have changed across the country, and they've absolutely changed across the Labour Party and the Labour movement. And now is the time for leadership. And let me say this, Sophie. There are a small group in our party who are so frustrated, who have so much grievance. The fear is that they're going to go off and form another party. I personally reject that. But the danger is, just like 1983, a new party built around basically a relationship with Europe keeps the Labour Party out of power for a generation.
How many
I don't
MPs
want
are you
those
talking
sorts.
about then?
I have no idea, but you will have heard the speculation, like me, and one sees colleagues behaving in certain ways. Please, let us unite the Labour Party now, unite the Labour Party around the idea and the concept that ultimately, whatever now happens, it's clear that the British people need a final say on the deal that's going to be hatched in the corridors of Westminster in the coming weeks.
OK, well, let's put some of that later to a member of the Shadow Cabinet. David Lammy, thank you very much.